Wow, NATO is freaking out right now about Russia and China, about Putin and Xi Jinping and that alliance. NATO and the West are openly admitting this week that power is slipping through their fingers. The power dynamic is shifting right before their eyes, and there's very little that they can do about it. And they're doing this with their words and actions right now. They're getting desperate. It's like watching a toddler falling on the floor crying because they're not getting their way. We've all been there. We'll have some more evidence of this in just a moment, but first, a lot of news items happening over the past few hours that I want to bring to your attention because I think they're incredibly important. First up, NATO, led by the United States, is getting desperate. And if you need proof, just look at their bullying of Turkey over the last 24 hours. Now, Turkey is a country that said it would not support Sweden's membership to NATO after that Koran burning incident. Remember that? Well, how did that sit with the deep state people running NATO? Oh, they didn't like that. See, they need to expand NATO in order to survive, and they are dying. So what did NATO do to Turkey? Well, they started fomenting terrorist attack propaganda in Turkey, warning that terror attacks are coming in Turkey. Seriously, you can't even make this stuff up. Remember, Turkey is a member of NATO, and NATO is pissed that Turkey has been trying to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine. They were holding peace talks back in January, as we covered on the show, and Boris Johnson flew in and torpedoed those peace talks. NATO didn't want peace talks. They want war. And then Boris Johnson has the balls to publish an opinion piece saying Putin paves the way for Ukraine to join NATO. Right. So NATO provokes a war with Russia by supporting non-stop bombing of innocent people in eastern Ukraine for the past 8 years, but it's Putin's fault. Got it. Thank you for that. They really think that we're stupid. Well, today they must think we're really, really stupid because NATO is today even more pissed that Turkey announced it won't allow Sweden into NATO, doubled down on it this week, said it would vote against it. So what does the US and the UK, what do they do about this? They start issuing warnings to people that we hear there are going to be terrorist attacks in Turkey very soon, so you might not want to travel there, scaring people. So the Netherlands, the UK, Belgium, Germany, and France all closed their embassies this week as a result. Again, you can't make this stuff up. This is how these warmongers operate. Just look at the U.S. State Department's website today, which warns travelers of being near crowds in Turkey. They have a current yellow alert warning for you. Don't go there. So where would these terror attacks come from? I wonder. Well, Turkey's not wondering. They know these false flag terror attacks would be set up by the United States and the United Kingdom, the same group who just blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. They have a partner pipeline with Russia called the Turk Stream pipeline. Think that's a target? Well, you'd be stupid not to. It's all about energy and resources and power. That's what this is all about. So, hey, Turkey, fall in line or the United States and the UK will help create terrorist attacks in Istanbul so we can get our way, just like we do in Iran, in Syria, in Yemen, and other hotspots around the world. Too many to count, actually. That's how we treat our friends, though. NATO keeps trying to expand. Just look how it keeps expanding east. So if Turkey blocks Sweden, then they would have this big problem on this map. Then you'd have this non-NATO country sitting right here, this white spot. They can't let that happen. Colonel Douglas Macgregor was on our show last week, and he sees NATO's death coming sooner rather than later.
And I was asked specifically about NATO, and I said, if we push this and the Russians go in and we fail to negotiate an end to this quickly, this will destroy NATO. Remember, NATO was founded as a defensive alliance. It was never designed for offensive operations.
Right.
There's nothing in the NATO charter about attacking anyone. Everything's about being the object of attack. We have been trying to use NATO as an offensive weapon since the 1990s. Since stupid people like Senator Lugar in the Senate said, well, either NATO is out of area, in other words, it's going to operate beyond Europe, or it's out of business. And most of us stood around at the time in the military and said, well, maybe it needs to go out of business because there's no reason for it to exist anymore. So I think as this moves forward and we put more and more pressure on the alliance, eventually the alliance will crumble.
NATO is a defensive organization created after World War II. Russia even asked to join NATO to become part of this new defensive alliance, again, to fight future fascism like Nazi Germany. America said no, because we can't have two world leaders, only one. And now the West is collapsing and admitting that their biggest threat is Putin and China and that growing partnership. So just listen this week to NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg admitting that they're terrified about what Russia and China are about to do.
Beijing is substantially building up its military forces, including nuclear weapons, without any transparency. Moscow and Beijing are deepening their strategic partnership. The two countries train and operate more together militarily, conducting joint naval and air patrols also in the vicinity of Japan. Their economic cooperation is increasing, and China has not condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
So what he's not saying is that this new growing partnership will completely upend the world order, because the war in Ukraine is about nothing more than territorial resources and economic power. And Russia and China are winning that war right now. Now, the brilliant Catherine Austin Fitts points out that what we're watching is not a war in Ukraine, but a war between the dollar syndicate and the euro syndicate. And the dollar syndicate is moving a lot of the euro syndicate into the dollar. Europe was getting too strong, so the US used the war in Ukraine to take back control. Watch.
As I see the Ukraine as essentially a move to by the Anglo-American alliance to control the European market share and make sure that Germany and Russia don't come together, Europe and Asia don't come together and cut out the Anglo-American, sort of market share alliance power position, if you will. It's really a war on Europe, if anything, and an assertion of control through NATO of Europe.
Of course she's right. Just look at the Nord Stream pipeline. We blew it up, and then we sell natural gas to Germany at 5 times the price that they were getting through the Nord Stream pipeline. Talk about an abusive relationship. This week we got some unbelievable numbers that came out. These are stunning. Now, while America is paying $10 for a dozen eggs, energy prices are through the roof. Germans can't afford their soaring cost of energy. Businesses across Britain have shut down. 100-year-old pubs have closed thanks to soaring energy costs. And Russia, the most sanctioned country in the world, last week posted amazing numbers from the International Monetary Fund. The IMF now projects that Russia, the most comprehensively sanctioned country in history of the world, will have positive GDP growth this year at a higher rate than Germany. Wrap your head around that. And the UK has negative growth. Really? So Russia's economy has grown under sanctions. Its exports of uranium, oil, copper, and other precious resources increased under sanctions. And Zelensky on Thursday morning told the EU how he's upset with the slowed down pace of sanctions right now. We've got 9 packages of sanctions, but he wants more. He wants them more quickly. So on Thursday, Ursula von der Leyen snapped to attention. She flew into Kyiv for the 4th time and announced a brand new round of sanctions at Russia. Yes, a 10th package that will come on the anniversary of the war's start date at the end of February. So I'm sure the 10th package of sanctions will make a whole boatload of difference. So while the West continues to sanction Russia, NATO is in desperation mode. China continues to expand its Russian imports of precious resources like oil, copper, zinc, uranium, and much, much more. Now, I went through China's customs data again this week, and the numbers are staggering. The total trade between China and Russia jumped 35.9% in 2021. That's the year before last, to a record $147.9 billion. And we don't have our 2022 end of year numbers just yet, but all of these numbers are pre-Ukraine war. That means they've been plotting and planning this alliance for years. So this huge increase in trade happened before the war. So while NATO has been trying to expand and bully other countries, China has been solidifying partnerships through its massive Belt and Road Initiative that expands trade through Asia and Europe. And Putin has been making sure that Russia is mostly self-sufficient. So I believe what we're about to see here is a massive, desperate push by NATO to try to topple Putin. And we're already hearing it in Washington. We're hearing members of Congress actively saying regime change. And that's what we do in other countries, right? Destabilize the Middle East and then swoop in with our own power and force to try to take up those resources. That's what they want to do in Russia. They are desperate, and desperate people do very dangerous things. Now, all of the headlines have been around Russian gas, which of course is damning enough. But I want to look deeper at some of the minerals that Klaus Schwab didn't think about when he was pushing for his Great Reset. You see, in order to move the world towards his Great Reset, you need a lot of minerals that he doesn't have right now. And China and Russia and their alliance are cutting off the world from silver, gold, copper, zinc, uranium, and more. To me, this is one of the most important stories of our time. So that's the news update part of this video, including sanctions and psychological desperate warfare by NATO. Now I want to tell you about today's sponsor for this video, which is